Well, welcome to this week's episode of the Political State Podcast. I'm Ben Felder with the Oklahoman. I'm here in the Oklahoman's podcast studios in our downtown newsroom. And joining me this week is Councilwoman Meg Salyer of Ward 6 here in Oklahoma City. And Councilwoman, at least for a couple of weeks, or 1 week.
1 week.
1 week. Thanks for your time. Welcome.
I'm really happy to be here. I love being in this downtown studio.
We are here in your ward, the heart of your ward, which includes downtown Oklahoma City, and bringing you in, as you say, 1 week left in your tenure, which began in 2008, right?
Yes, it was an unusual timing because I filled an unexpired term that Ann Simek had completed. She resigned when her son became a firefighter, and so there was a 2.5-year term to fill. And so my election was actually November of 2008.
Okay, so a decade on the council, that's a significant amount of time in representing one. You know, all the wards are important, so not to say that one's more important than the other, but the ward that includes downtown Oklahoma City, which has transformed quite a bit during your tenure. I want to start you with this question. I mean, your impact in the city is not just on the council. You're a business owner and has been involved in some other ways. What do you feel like is your defining legacy as a councilwoman as you prepare to leave the bench here?
If I'm quick and a little flip, it might be the quiet zone.
Okay, explain that. Yeah.
You know, that really was a big deal. The railroad, because we had so many at-grade railroad crossings downtown, the engineers are required to sound their horn a mile or so before they get to one of those intersections. And because we had 7 or 8 in the span of 16th Street down to 23rd Street on the south side, that horn would blow continuously. I believe we have 44 trains that run that corridor every day, and we could time our phone calls to know, when this thing was going to blow. My office is a block and a half away, and virtually everybody I talked to on the phone, on a conference call would know they were in Oklahoma City because you could just hear that horn blow. So it took almost 8 years to accomplish creating what the Railroad Commission calls a sealed railroad corridor, where by virtue of either closing intersections, modifying the bars that come down so people can't drive around them, or putting medians in the street so that people can't drive around, they're able to close the corridor and therefore not have to blow the whistle. So we created this corridor in downtown that really exists from Western and Britain all the way down to Southeast 23rd Street. Yeah,
and that's one of those things that people don't talk about as much anymore, and that's the point.
Right, exactly.
People don't know that
they don't
realize the train is going through it.
But what you do see now is this incredible amount of development happening on the side streets. I always knew that Broadway was obvious, and when the Metropolitan was built, Oklahoma became very obvious. But 8th Street, 9th Street, 12th Street, 11th Street, where Oklahoma Contemporary is going, the activity that's happening on those connectors is exploding. We've got tap rooms and breweries and restaurants, and it's amazing.
It's a great example of kind of just the practicalness of city council, of municipal government. I mean, when you talk about an elected official's kind of legacy, it's easy to kind of get caught up in vision casting and symbolic shifts, and those things can be very important, and do want to talk about that. But those things that seem kind of simple, like a quiet zone, definitely puts a footprint on your ward and on the city.
And it wasn't simple, and it wasn't cheap. And it required a public-private partnership. So all the things that we do that are big or small, another legacy that was not just mine but is so important for the city was the creation of the Westtown campus and the Resource Center over at 4th and Virginia. And as I was discarding files the other day in my office, I was reminded that, that happened in 2009. Many people won't remember, but for years the city had a day shelter called Rest. But in the wake of the aftermath of the bombing and the kind of redirection of all nonprofit dollars at that period in our history to victims and survivors, Rest went out of business, if you will, in 1997. And so we had this gap in services being able to be provided that lasted until 2008. And we remember going into the recession remember the Obama administration providing stimulus dollars, and our very creative planning department was able to reach out to the federal administration and ask if we could apply a certain amount of those dollars to the recreation of the West Town campus and the day shelter.
Yeah.
And so, that's another important piece of a puzzle dealing with a very difficult problem that occurred during the time I've been able to serve.
Yeah. So why did you decide this was the time to exit the council? Why not seek reelection?
Well, I think, Ben, I feel as if we've sort of put everything in a box and tied it up with a bow and are handing it to this next generation of leadership. I joined the council as we were beginning the conversation with the citizens about MAPS 3, if we were going to have one, and what that might look like, and what projects would be included. We were able to successfully put a package together that citizens voted on. One of the most exhilarating nights was that December '09 vote when the citizens approved the package, and then the hard work started of actually executing on those projects. We started with little ones because hopefully everybody remembers that we can't begin a project until we have the money in the bank. And so we started with sidewalks and trails and have built up over the 10 years to working on and completing the last 3 big projects, which would be the streetcar, the park, and the convention center. So one of the things I wanted to wait for was for the bid to come in on the convention center. Last big project, wanted to make sure we could fulfill the citizens' expectations of what we had promised. And, lo and behold, the bid came in $20 million under budget, which provides this unique opportunity to do some extra things like Union Station and extra streetcars and work down in the Boathouse District. So, that was a big accomplishment. And the other thing that seems slow and incremental, and I know it has been, but every single year that I've served on the council, we've been able to do something to enhance bus transit. I go back to the very beginning. We hired a consultant. That doesn't sound very glamorous, but we hired a consultant to help us look at how we could improve headways and clarify. We had bus routes that would meander through neighborhoods.
Yeah.
And now we've taken advantage of the city's street grid, and the buses run on grids. It's easier to understand, and it is quicker and more efficient. And from that jumping off point, we were able to, every time we added money, we were able to add buses or add routes. We expanded Saturday bus service. We added night service. And finally, this last budget cycle, we were able to add Sunday service. And that was sort of the icing on the cake for me. And so I feel as if we've accomplished a tremendous amount. We've completed a lot of things that I personally set out and was involved with. And as we're beginning this conversation about MAPS 4 and where the community goes from here, I didn't feel like it was fair or sensible to be involved in the front end of the conversation if it was unlikely to be there to see it through to completion.
Yeah. Well, you talk about kind of, handing on the baton to the next generation, and that storyline has been played up a lot because, you do have a couple new members onto the council who are of a new generation, including here in Ward 6, Jo Beth Hammond, who's the councilwoman-elect. She had a campaign that really kind of ran on social service focus, I suppose you could say, transit, things that you did talk about as well. But there did seem to be this kind of, and this is kind of natural when someone's not running and then there's an open seat that someone talks about, improving and going in a better direction. How did you take that campaign? Did you see that as kind of did you see it as kind of a criticism of your time? Did you just see it as kind of the natural next step? I mean, I'm curious, what was going through your mind as you were kind of watching this race for your seat?
I think I'd like to characterize it as a natural next step. We've really executed a tremendous amount of work that needed to happen in downtown. And you've heard me talk before about, if the city is a body with appendages, the downtown is clearly the heart. And when I joined the council, we were flatlined. Downtown was barely breathing. And people may disagree with me about this, and many do, but I don't believe you can have a vibrant city without having a vibrant downtown. And I do also believe that the young generation of leaders that are following us are as concerned about placemaking and live, work, play space and walkability and transit as were we when we put MAPS 3 together. I mean, the elements that we're talking about now are all part of what was MAPS 3. So I think it's a natural extension. We've built a city, you know, and I even go back to sort of I've been in Oklahoma City for 35 years and working with city leaders, working with the chamber, working with the business community. We all spent a lot of time trying to figure out how do we build a city that young people want to stay in and that young people will come to. You know, we've discussed for years the fact that you used to have to go move somewhere to find the job you want.
Yeah.
Today, you move somewhere to where you want to live because of all these things we've talked about, and then you find a job or you create a job. And so we're really living in a different world today. And so I do just think that the focus on issues that are of critical importance to our community, and we have been working on them, it takes, I guess one way to explain this is it takes dollars to do all these things. And I have often viewed my role on the council as trying to make the pie bigger so that we have more resources to tend to the full spectrum of things that we do.
Yeah. I suppose if you're going to build a city that's more inclusive, where you have more young residents moving in, it's going to naturally breed new stakeholders, you know, new candidates, and they may have different ideas or may have a different view of looking at it, but that's just kind of how
it's
the process
exactly
works.
what we wished for.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, we've intentionally created this environment. And so, you know, I have said in some of these discussions over the course of the last couple of weeks, I'm incredibly excited about the future and the opportunities. I do remain hopeful that new leadership will also reflect back and remember that Oklahoma City hasn't always been like this. And it took a tremendous amount of hard work and collegiality and collaboration to get where we are. And momentum is a fragile thing. And so, you know, I think, I hope everybody's mindful of that.
Yeah. Your ward also includes south of the river, the Capitol Hill neighborhood. It's easy for downtown to get a lot of attention. I think sometimes you get, you know, you hear that from people. Talk about south of the river, the south side a little bit. What did you feel like you were able to get done during your time, and what's left to get done, and where would you like things to move forward?
Well, Ben, there's a lot to get done, but I do think we've accomplished a lot. And maybe just for your listeners, the demographics of Ward 6 are really interesting. You know, we have 8 wards in the city. Ward 6 is the smallest geographic ward. It's only 18 square miles, as opposed to some that are 120 or 140 square miles. But it's the most densely populated. It is almost exactly 50-50 divided between Hispanic and Caucasian. It's the poorest, and it's the youngest, which are all really interesting statistics. And it was a challenging ward to represent because of very diverse and divergent needs and issues. But things that I care about a lot that occur in South Oklahoma City, you know, economic development, revitalization of Capitol Hill, rebuilding of housing stock, you know, those kinds of things are beginning to percolate. I would say that for me personally, the most encouraging thing that I've seen and been able to participate in is the growing young leadership and growing female leadership in the Hispanic community. And, you know, I'll just point to a couple of examples, but Brenda Hernandez is my appointee to the Better Streets, Safer Cities Board. So, you know, she's directing millions and millions of dollars of our penny sales tax and helping to identify projects in Ward 6, many of which are south of the river. Miriam Campos serves as my Ward 6 representative on the Citizens Committee for Community Development. That group looks at all of our HUD dollars. That's $20 million or more of federal programming that comes through the city to be used to, you know, help in disadvantaged census tract neighborhoods. You know, we've got hopefully Gloria Torres remaining on the school board. And I could name many, many more, but a group of women that were super supportive of me and, would get together to try to address issues anytime we needed to. And so I see this sort of burgeoning leadership helping to come along right with us as we go into this next generation.
Yeah. Any big regrets or anything that you feel like you would have liked to have got done if you were to go back in 2008 and know that you were going to be on the council for a decade? Is there something that you said, man, this is something I definitely want to get done that maybe didn't, that you feel like, or at least is maybe not as far along as you would have liked?
Oh, Ben, that's hard. I guess there are always things that I know that we could have done better. And many of them have to do with financial constraints. I do, really think that the city, what I have learned over the last 10 years is how wonderful and responsible the city staff is at managing our resources. And, I think a lot of times people don't focus on the way our general fund is divvied up. And the city of Oklahoma City has a general fund budget of about $400 million, 2/3 of which goes to public safety. And so we've got a third of $400 million, so $120, $130 million, to do everything else that everybody wants us to see. Not that public safety isn't the most important and the most visible, because clearly it is. And we've got the best public service officers and firefighters, I think, of any city in the country. But could we have done better on streets and potholes and infrastructure things? Sure, we could have. But we realized it and addressed it with better streets and safer cities. So we've got challenges, as we're moving forward, conversations about affordable housing. The flip side of all this amazing growth and development and placemaking opportunities and building neighborhoods is that, we have created an environment where it's challenging for some of those with lesser means. So I don't have any big regrets. It's more or less that there is a lot more work to do, and I'm excited for folks to take the baton and run with what the next 10 years looks like.
Yeah. How have you changed in the last 10 years, or how has your perspective changed? Maybe you would say it hasn't, but
my perspective has changed tremendously. I have learned so much, and it would take up 6 of these podcasts to talk to you about the things I've learned. But, the first and foremost would be the importance of listening and trying to, and really being clear that a room of super smart people, all with good intentions, have very big differences of opinion. So that's one. The second thing, I think, is how words really matter. And it's easy to be misinterpreted or to make a mistake. I'm going to go back on something you just asked me and say, is there anything I regret? And one of those is that in trying to work on the homeless issue and how we deal with respecting and solving people's problems, my use of the word panhandling when we were trying to solve some problems is something I regret. That really was not. I was trying to create some distinctions between those that have a business and those that are truly in need.
And you're kind of referring to the time when there was the conversation about panhandling at intersections.
When we were working on the median safety ordinance, and it became very polarizing, and a lot of people, I believe, misinterpreted where I was trying to go with this. I had a real education in that, and I would like to publicly thank Rania and Whitley O'Connor for helping. They have become very good friends, and I so appreciate the work that the Curbside's doing. It's making a huge difference, and so Rania helped me, learn how to walk into a camp, how to confront people in difficult situations, how to begin conversations, how to try to get help, and I have been really welcomed by many in the community and created some partnerships that I hope I'll be able to continue.
Yeah. As we kind of wrap up here in this episode, I want to get your thoughts a little bit on, you're leaving the council, so as Councilman Shadid, the Ward 2 councilman, and I think that's just kind of an interesting dichotomy, right? Because I think you could make the case that you both have left your stamp on the city in a variety of ways, and you're both leaving, kind of passing the baton, so to speak, to that next generation. Yet you are probably very different in a lot of ways. I mean, you probably would tell me, hey, we have some similarities, and I know you guys shared some words, some kind words last week.
I'm smiling because I knew you were going to try to get somewhere with this.
I'm just kind of reflect on what was your relationship like with Councilman Shadid, and I mean, I don't mean to paint you guys as at odds. Often, and Shadid has been in the studio several weeks ago for kind of a similar exit interview, if you will. Talking about his role. But what was your relationship like with Councilman Shadid, and what are your thoughts on just kind of his tenure? 2010, I believe, is when he was elected, but so almost as long as yours.
Well, Ben, you highlight the fact that we do have some different opinions about things, and it really goes to the point I made earlier about very smart people may completely disagree. Councilman Shadid is one of the brightest people I've had the chance to work with, and a lot of good ideas. And when I was reflecting on this, of course, over the course of the last few weeks, and I mentioned it the other day, is the Boulevard project, I think is substantially better than it started out on the drawing board, specifically because the two of us were able to work together. We agreed it wasn't good. We agreed we needed to hire some consulting people. We agreed that we needed to take more time to talk about this and get input, and ultimately compromised to something that I think virtually every property owner along the boulevard is cheering the results. And so, an area that we disagreed about fairly regularly was the use of TIF dollars in development. And I respect his argument, but I respectfully disagree. I think the success of the districts that we've created and the development surrounding it, this downtown TIF is affectionately known as TIF 2. It has produced more revenue because it has produced so much more development than we ever anticipated, with those dollars flowing back into the school system, into the library system, and at the wrap-up of 25 years, all of those entities will be the beneficiary of tremendous new revenue streams where development wouldn't have happened but for that progress. I also believe in providing incentives where needed in order to close a deal. My idea, again, as I said, about making the pie bigger, we need to bring jobs here. We need to create opportunities for people. And if we're competing against folks that offer those same types of things, I think we're part of the process. Now, the game may be changing, and we may not need to do that so much anymore. But to keep Oklahoma City growing and vibrant and creating jobs and creating opportunities for people to start businesses, I think that's a big part of our responsibility on the council. So
you think incentives are still a very viable tool for the city to be using forward? Because critics would say that when you talk about TIF, that yes, when you started out, you're trying to spur development. Now, Oklahoma City's downtown would not necessarily be an example of wouldn't appear to be a neighborhood in need of incentives.
It's project by project, Ben, and it's fits that but for test. So we can use all sorts of examples. One of my favorite places to go after work these days is in the Main Street Arcade. That project would never have happened had it not been for the availability of TIF dollars. And, it gets a little bit mechanical, but the legislation that allows for TIFs allows the city to use ad valorem tax, which are property taxes, to pay for the development costs. Cities don't get access to ad valorem dollars except through that kind of a special mechanism. Our budget, municipal budget, is exclusively focused on sales tax revenues. So to have a mechanism in place where we can find an additional source of revenue that we wouldn't have otherwise to help fund development that builds the base of property taxes going forward, I think is a great tool.
Yeah. Finally, what is your post-council career going to look like in terms of your involvement, if any, in terms of the city's continued move forward?
Right. Well, I'm certainly not going anywhere. Oklahoma City's my home, and I consider myself incredibly fortunate to live here. I do still have 2 full-time jobs. I own a staffing company and do some real estate development. I wouldn't be surprised if I didn't do some things in that arena that I haven't been able to do while I've been serving on the council, but I still serve on a number of boards, corporate and nonprofit boards, and I will probably pick and choose a little bit more carefully, but I certainly intend to be engaged in the city's growth and look forward to working with you and others to keep us moving forward.
Yeah, elected office days over, or
elected office days over.
Officially, okay.
100% officially.
Yeah. Well, Meg Salyer, Councilwoman, for another week. Thank you so much for your time and taking for this conversation, kind of looking back at your tenure.
Appreciate it, Ben. Thanks for having me.
Congratulations on your career and your retirement. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.
Well, that's going to do it for this week's episode of the Political State Podcast. You can find this and each and every episode on your favorite podcasting app. We're also on YouTube and newsok.com. For the Oklahoman, I'm Ben Felder. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next week for another episode of Political State.